Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I am your host, Samuel. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire country. And it doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing to diagnostic lab, you name it. You will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 5% performer within your role in sales, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Today we have with us Eric Turbiville. He's a special guest because he actually comes from the pharmaceutical space. He worked for Novo Nordisk as the VP of Sales. But what's interesting about his career track is he then took that on to become an executive coach with his own organization. He's a respected author with his book, The Perfect Leadership Triad. And it's so interesting to hear his experiences because, of course, he has all the insight and value from being a VP, but he continues to enhance that value and get much, much deeper insights by coaching executives in multiple industries, including healthcare. So this is going to be an amazing episode. As always, thank you for listening to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I really do hope you enjoy this interview. Hey, Eric, how are we doing today?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing, Samuel?
I'm fantastic. Just another day in 2021, trying to make things happen. Everybody, we have with us today Eric Turbiville. And Eric, you know what? Let me stop there. Why don't you tell the audience who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I am a former pharmaceutical executive. Most recent position that I held in pharma before leaving was vice president of sales for Novo Nordisk, where I led teams of up to 800 people. And I spent about just over 25 years in the pharmaceutical industry. And a couple of years ago, I left to pursue my passion, which is inspiring, coaching, and developing people as a credentialed executive coach. So I do coaching of executives, pretty much director and above in organizations. And then I also do leadership development workshops. And I'm the author of a fairly new book called The Perfect Leadership Triad, which is a book about leadership.
Wow.
Okay. And, it's really, the book is based on my beliefs around three key principles of leadership, and that is focusing on your people, your coaching, and your performance.
Love it. Love it. So, okay, that's an interesting jump. Well, actually, why don't you educate us? Is that common? Is what you did very unique? What, most people, when they get to that space that you were in, vice president, they get to that role, what are they thinking to do?
What are they thinking to do?
Yeah, as far as career progression, are they thinking, is that the time that's, most people at that time say, you know what, I think I want to try something entrepreneurial, or most of them say, no, I want to continue this track and take it to a different level. What's usually going on?
Yeah, I think most executives are, focused on the career ladder, moving up in an organization. And for me, it was a little different because I live in Dallas and I did not want to relocate to the Northeast.
Sure.
Because for family reasons and such. So my career was limited because there were only so many executive positions that were based in the field.
Sure.
But I think when executives are in the home office, they tend to want to grow in an organization and take on other responsibilities and other roles. I've seen a lot of, my peers move up in organizations up to president and CEO of organizations and really grow their career. But for me, it was, I wanted to become an entrepreneur.
Got it.
I thought, pursue my passion. It blossomed towards the end of my career when I realized that I really wanted to spend the end of my career, my working years, doing something that full-time that I really did love to do. And as I mentioned earlier, that's, inspiring, coaching, and developing people. And I get to do that all day.
Yeah.
That's my job.
That's
no
awesome.
Meetings, no Zoom meetings, no, nothing like that. I just get to do what I enjoy doing.
Excellent. All right. So talk to us about what got you into pharma in the first place. Take us back to college. What was your major? What were you doing? And why pharmaceutical sales?
Yeah, so I was a Spanish and psychology major, a double major. And I I didn't select the pharmaceutical industry. It kind of selected me. And I'll tell you why. I graduated in May. I was supposed to start law school in August. I needed a summer job. So I saw this ad, for a pharmaceutical rep, and you got a car and you got benefits and you got money, which I hadn't had in college. So,
Right.
so I took the position and I loved it so much that I delayed entry into law school for another year, and ultimately never went back to law school because I loved what I was doing in the pharma industry. So I started out as a sales rep, and it was fun. I enjoyed it, and it felt like I was having an impact on patients. It was like you were helping somebody in their lives.
Wow. So yeah, you really changed up gears then. And you're right. Pharma was kind of an opportunity you never saw coming. So when you got into your career, and you performed as a sales rep, was your progression through different spaces just kind of organic? You're performing, you did well, you thought about leadership, you got into management, or was there much more to that story?
Yeah. So for me, it was pretty organic because, I figured out, and I tell the story in my book, one of my first managers that I had was the exact opposite of what I write about in the book. He was very business focused, did not really care much about the people that reported to him. And I made the decision one day. I was like, okay, I can do that job, and I actually care about people. I actually want them to perform and do well. So that was one of the things that kind of motivated me to want to go into leadership in pharmaceuticals. And I did the traditional route. I mean, I was a rep, a trainer, a first line manager, and then I was promoted to be a second line manager. I went over from sales to market access for about 7 or 8 years, and worked as an account executive, and then a director over account executives, and then a national, director, and then moved into a VP role. So it was pretty standard progression.
So, for those listening that are sales reps right now and they're working in pharmaceutical sales. Well, actually, let me ask you this. There's so many spaces: pharmaceutical sales, genetic sales, molecular sales, biotech sales, medical device sales. And now that you're in this position where you coach a lot of people in a lot of these different spaces, would you say that the trajectory for a sales rep and then to move on to executive is similar in all these different spaces within healthcare, or are these nuances within the fields dramatically different?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of similarities, and the one thing I would say is that a lot of companies, in order to become an executive, you have to have, kind of either market access and marketing experiences. I never really had a marketing experience. I had 6 months of marketing as a preceptor, and I figured out real fast, I'm not a marketer.
Right.
I'm a sales guy.
Sure.
So I think that there's a lot of similarities. The one thing I would say is that I have friends who left pharma to go into device or other areas, and they didn't want to become managers because they would make more money as a rep than a manager. So, the reps in some of these companies are making more money than their managers. So, if money's a motivator, which I've never believed that it's like a number one motivator for people. But if it is a major motivator for you in some of those verticals, you may not want to go into management.
Sure. However, when you really ascend that ladder and get to like where you were vice president, then even the compensation kind of matches whatever your dreams were. If you were a sales rep that wanted to get higher and you also wanted to make more, would you say that's a fair?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So then, for these sales reps listening, and since they're all similar within the different healthcare fields, what would you say sales reps should be thinking about as they're performing? Think about your performer. He wants to get into leadership. What things does he or she need to keep top of mind?
Yeah. So the first thing is, I would say, keep in mind that there are opportunities on any team that you're on to take on additional responsibilities. take on projects, take on, other types of responsibilities that maybe your manager will give you. And the other thing I would say is start acting like you already have that management position. Start doing, thinking, acting like you're the manager, and you will start developing the skills that you need to actually be the manager.
And now I want to bring up kind of I wouldn't call it well, yeah, it's kind of a belief out there that you can move up when you're a top performer. But there's also this belief that you don't have to be a top performer to move up. Can you speak a little bit to that? What do you need if you're not a top performer? You're a solid performer, but you're not a top performer. But you're still a good, you're doing good enough. Yeah. What type of things can that type of person demonstrate that can allow them to still get into, a management role, an executive role from a sales rep?
Yeah, so I think that most people will agree that the very top performers don't always make the best leaders. They're great individual contributors, but they're not always, leadership material.
Sure.
So if, I like to look at top performers, but also very solid performers like you were just referring to, and look at the skills they developed along the way. Look to see if they have emotional intelligence, which is vital to be successful as a leader.
Sure.
And I'll give you an example. As a VP, one of my directors was out on leave. And so we had a first line management position open. And so I was going to be part of the interview process for that, part of the initial interviews. So there was a woman that was a specialty sales rep for us, but I met her at a meeting and I was so impressed with her, and she really wanted to interview for the DBM position. And I was like, okay, this is way outside of what we normally do. But I was just so impressed with her as a performer and just her skills and her ability to present herself and everything. I interviewed her, and she did better than in the interviews. She did better than people who were currently managers and people who were trainers and had worked through the career progression ladder.
Yeah.
And what she told me is that I said, how did you develop these leadership skills? And she was a member and a leader for Healthcare Businesswomen's Association, HBA,
wow.
Which I would strongly encourage female leaders and in the industry, healthcare industry across the board, to look into HBA, because there's some great opportunities for volunteer work, leadership work, and to develop those skills. So she told me she developed those skills in HBA. And, ultimately I didn't hire her because there was another manager who came in that transferred, but she was the second best candidate and she was a sales rep.
Yeah.
So, it's building those skills, those leadership skills, that emotional intelligence, that ability to have empathy, that ability to get people to follow you, along the way because they trust you.
Got it. That makes sense. So now I want to transition to the next level in that. So think about the manager that now wants to become an executive. Now the manager, as you just shared, they're demonstrating a lot of leadership skills. They have emotional intelligence. They're a leader, but they want to take things to a different level now. What do they need to keep in mind, and what should they be thinking about as they have their eye on that?
I would say one of the most important things is their network, because I have seen, very, very qualified people not get promoted. Sure. Because the hiring managers don't know those people very well.
Gotcha.
And having a relationship and a mentor that is at a higher level and understanding who is going to be able to hire you, and, knowing what your plan is so that you can start, really networking with the people that are going to be able to hire you.
Sure.
Because I've seen super qualified people not get promoted because they didn't have a network.
Right.
And I've seen people that you look at and you go, okay, are they really that good? And not promoted.
I get it. So then, okay. So what I've seen a lot is you have a manager, he wants to be an executive, and the opportunity is just not there because he doesn't have the network. Maybe the skills are falling short on the decision. As far as the decision makers are concerned, something's missing. But then you do find them in a different company, maybe a smaller company, and they actually do now have an executive position.
Yes.
How often do you see that, and do you advocate for that type of movement?
Yes, I've seen that a lot, and I do advocate for that because, you can hit a ceiling at a company, and there are a lot of variables as to why that happens. You hit a ceiling and you leave the company, and you end up, as an executive in another company. I've seen that so many times, and I do support that. I think that if you feel like you've hit a ceiling in your company and you're not feeling like you're growing anymore, that you should start looking for other opportunities. That lack of growth and development is one of the top two reasons people leave jobs. It's not, we've always heard it's the manager, is the main reason people leave jobs, and, it's the company, but they really leave for other reasons too.
Yeah, they want to grow. Okay,
Yeah.
so follow me on this. Is there a time limit? Now, you hear a lot that there shouldn't be a time limit, but actually, is there a time limit? Is there a time to say, you know what, X amount of years, I should not be in this position any longer?
Yeah, I would just say you have to be careful, because I've seen people who are on fast tracks that get promoted every 12 months, and there's no way in 12 months that you can, excel in a position or really know it or understand it. And I've seen people that run from positions to another position, and they're kind of running from stuff their whole career.
Sure.
Right. So there's that side of it where people don't stay in positions long enough to prove themselves. On the other hand, there are times when people stay in positions too long.
Yeah, I see that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I can remember I was a first line manager, and I was in an organization that I hit a ceiling at. And I'll never forget, I was, working to get promoted, and two different positions didn't work out for me. And, I was an internal candidate. And finally, the VP said, maybe you should just be happy being a first line manager.
Oh, they gave you that talk.
Yeah, I got that talk. And I thought, okay, that's a pretty good signal that my career here is not going to progress much more.
But let's quantify it. What's too long in your opinion? What's too long?
Yeah. Are you referring to any given position?
Yeah. I mean, if it's different depending on the position, please explain that. But, I'm trying to get to a number of what can people keep in mind. Okay, this is probably too long.
Yeah. I honestly think that if you've been in a position over about 5 years, you probably are going to be a little limited, but there are exceptions to that. Because maybe it was because you couldn't relocate because of the ages of your kids or certain situations, and the promotion requires a relocation. So, I would say in most positions it's probably about 5 years, and then you better move on before then.
Gotcha. Now, when you were a rep, I'm sure you heard this kind of talk. Did that person get tapped on the shoulders? You moved up into whatever position.
Right.
As VP, how are you? How did you look at talent? Were you normally just kind of going over talent? Did you actually have people that you wanted to be groomed specifically? Was it kind of just, well, whoever shows up at this space and does this well, then we'll consider them? How did you really look at it when you were VP?
Yeah. So, I always believed in succession planning. So, I spent a lot of time talking about our people when I was a VP. In fact, the first hour of every one-on-one that I had with my directors was about their people.
Oh, wow.
Specifically, it was about their first line managers that they were supervising, what their goals were, kind of how you rank your team, who's the strongest leader, are they able, do they have the runway to get promoted to other positions. So, again, I was very people focused around that, because I knew that having the right people on the team, the right leaders, would drive the business. So I believe in being very formal about that and letting people know, if their desire is to get promoted and they're on your radar in the succession plan, you let them know. Because I've been in companies where they have a succession plan and the people that are on that plan don't even know it. And it's crazy. Like, okay, you got to tell them that they're on there to keep them motivated, to let them know that you're watching them.
Sure. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you were very, very intentional around bringing talent. And how often, and let me choose my word carefully here. How often, and I don't want to say disappointed, but what usually happened when you guessed wrong? When you thought someone had it and they didn't, what was typically the problem, and did that happen? How often did that happen?
Yeah, it usually happened at the first line leadership level. And it was they couldn't make that switch to being a leader versus an individual contributor. And I call it kind of the super rep syndrome for a first line manager. They still think that they're a sales rep, and they're interrupting the sales rep when they're out in the field. They're trying to take over calls. They want people to do things the way they did it, rather than what's comfortable for the person that's involved. That's usually where the disconnect happened. Once you got past first line, if you had skills, you were going to be able to go to second line and maybe a third line VP type position.
Got it. All right. Now this comes up a lot too, and I would love to get your thoughts on this as well. So you have this really ambitious rep. I mean, they're after it. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And you have this manager that, for whatever reason, there's a disconnect between the manager and the rep. And the rep feels like, I don't know how I'm going to get further in my career outside of this manager.
Right.
What would you, considering everything you've seen in your scope, what would you advise the rep to try to do to position themselves to still move ahead without crossing that manager and making their lives more difficult within their position?
Yeah, I used to joke, if you don't like your manager, wait a year and you'll have a new one. So
that's tough. That is tough.
Because in pharma, at least during my career,
Sure.
especially in the last 15 years, there was a reorg every 12 to 18 months. And people got shifted around. So, when I coach people or mentor someone who's struggling with their manager, not feeling like they're going to be able to move on in their career or move up or progress, or maybe they're just not, getting along with the manager because of personality type things. I always say, don't leave a company. If you love the culture, if you love the company, you love the products you're selling, don't leave because of a manager. Work your way through it. Now, there are times when you ultimately do have to leave because the manager is abusive or, is not treating people right and some things like that. But you hope that, and while hope isn't a strategy, you have to hope that the other leaders, if you have a problematic, leader in place, that everybody else sees that.
So your recommendation to this person is to be visible enough that your contribution is, it will be noticed by someone.
Yes. And I've had as a VP, I've had people who wanted to get promoted, and I knew their leader was not promoting them
intentionally. You knew
it.
it.
Yes. And so, I've intervened in those types of situations, and I let that person know that, hey, I see you. I see what you're doing, and you're doing some great things. So, don't feel like, hopefully you don't feel like no one notices, because we do notice. And if I notice, other people notice.
Right. So, one thing that's championed, I mean, even in my program, I'm working with stuff, I champion, get your sponsors together, get your mentors together. Right. And then I get the question of, well, you know what, Samuel, I really want to reach out to this sponsor or make this person my mentor, but I don't know if that's going to make my manager feel like I'm overreaching from my position. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I don't think it's overreaching. I'll give you an example. I have a son that works for Oracle, and came right out of college, started working for Oracle in sales, and I talked to him a lot about having a mentor. And most people, when you ask them to be a mentor, they'll do it. And as long as you just let your manager know that you're seeking a mentor that's a couple levels higher, most managers don't get upset at that. As long as you keep them in the loop and they don't feel threatened that you're telling on them or doing something like that. But my son who works at Oracle, we talked a lot about him having a mentor. And he said, well, what if they say no? And I said, I promise you, they're not going to say no to you. As long as you bring value to them, and they'll bring value to you and they'll help you. And sure enough, he went to a VP, and he's an entry level sales kid, he's a young guy. He goes to a VP. The VP agrees to mentor him, and he's been promoted in 2.5 years. He's been promoted. He's getting ready to get promoted for the third time because he has that network. And these are the people that are making the ultimate decision on a lot of these promotions too. So, tell your manager, let them know that you want a mentor, and let them know who you're thinking of, or get their suggestions on who you might have as a mentor. And then go seek out a mentor that can help you, at least a couple levels higher than you are. And, I've never said no to somebody who asked me to mentor. I mentored lots of people in my career.
Yeah.
I've never said no.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Okay. All right. So right now, Eric, who's your main? I know you coach a lot of different types of people, from C-suite to sales rep.
Yeah.
Where is the majority of your time spent? Which type of person is the majority of your time spent?
The majority of my time is spent kind of at the VP level, coaching, VPs. And the reason why is what I find, and which I love as an executive coach, is that most C-suite and VPs don't get coaching of any kind. They are expected to know, pretty much everything when they get hired for the job. And while they may be learning along the way, there's no time for most executives to get coaching from their bosses. So it creates a beautiful gap for me to come and coach.
Well, if you can share, what are some of talking about this gap, what's missing that you've noticed out of all the VPs you've been coaching, people around that level? What have you noticed is missing or that needs to be developed?
Yeah, I think that decision making is one of the big ones. I think for many executives, they don't always have executive presence.
Executive presence.
Executive presence, like which really encompasses a lot of characteristics and traits. But you usually think of it when they walk into a room, people, want to listen to them. They don't have to be some extrovert, you know. Introverts can have just as much executive presence as extroverts. But decision making, executive presence, I think learning to ask really good questions of their people and coaching their people. That coaching is a huge gap. There are very few leaders, especially executives, who truly coach their people.
Okay. So you said you gave quite a bit there. So executive presence, coaching, decision making. What do you mean by? I'm assuming if they were brought into that role, they have some strong level of decision making. When you say decision making, what are you speaking to specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I've had some clients that want to overanalyze, and they analyze, and it becomes, paralysis.
My analysis. Got it.
Yeah. And, I mean, I always believe that you get 70-80% of the information and you make a decision. And if you need to course correct, you course correct later. But you have to make a decision. And especially in our marketplace today, things are happening very quickly. And you have to plan for it, and you have to move quickly and make decisions. That's probably the biggest one I see. The other one around decision making that I see is for new executives. They don't always have the confidence to speak up and make decisions quickly. They start trying to get kind of consensus, leadership by consensus, instead of, and getting people's input is very important so that they feel like they're part of the decision in many cases. But you can't let a team make a decision.
So,
You're the leader. You have to make it.
okay. And so when you say that, you're not talking about trying to play politics. You're not talking about that.
No, not at all.
You're talking about this decision maker is just reticent to make a decision because they just want to make sure they have all the facts and all the input from everybody they can possibly get.
Yeah, that would be the one person. And then the other type is a newer executive who's just, doesn't quite have the confidence yet or understand, the decisions that need to be made usually fairly quickly.
Got it. Okay. So when you talk about executive presence, tell us a little bit more about what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, you see leaders that, I'll use the podium as one example. You're up talking to a team of 800 to 1,000 people, or you're talking to a team of 10 or 20, and your body language shows that you're not confident. Your voice shows that you're not confident. You don't get people's attention, or they're not actively participating because they're watching you going, what's going on? Is this a leader? Who is this? The more important part of executive presence to me is having characteristics and traits like people trust you, that you're trustworthy, that you're candid, that you're open. And those are part of being, having executive presence, all of those characteristics that make for a great leader. So when I'm coaching somebody around executive presence, I like to try to find out quickly, where the gaps are. And I use there's one company that I'm a partner with that can measure executive presence.
Wow.
And I use one of those surveys and such to be able to figure that out.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's an interesting one because you would think that someone that is at that level just kind of demonstrates that already, but you're saying they either demonstrate at a higher level, or people that get to that position sometimes just don't demonstrate.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that get promoted because they're technically extremely competent.
Gotcha.
And I'll give you an example. I was coaching an executive at a major music label, and he was technically very competent. The problem was he lacked emotional intelligence and executive presence. And he was going to get fired if he didn't turn it around. So I worked with him for several months on his executive presence and his emotional intelligence. Like, he would just say things. He didn't have a filter.
Gotcha.
He just said things, and it came across as grossly offensive, like insensitive, just a variety of things. And his direct reports were not doing well with him. But he was able to turn that around, and he became more confident with his team. And, he developed kind of some simple things that he would do before he would talk.
Yeah.
Like not just counting to 5, but, we actually had some techniques that we used with him to be able to stop and, and actually trust that people, have good motives and things like that. So.
Wow. That actually makes me wonder. And, of course, what you can share, just what you can share. I'm curious to know, what's the most dramatic change that you've experienced coaching someone at this level? That they started wherever they started, and you just saw them blossom into almost a completely different person and really took their role by the horns.
Yeah, I was coaching a new sales VP, and he had just been promoted into that role, and he took over a geography that had been led by someone who is a very strong and had a very strong will and who directed his people, basically told them what to do rather than coaching them and letting them have, some autonomy. And the team was very much tied to that previous leader, like had like a little click.
So that's how they saw things getting done. It needs to be delivered to us that way.
Yes, yes. So when this leader came in, her style was totally different. So she was very candid, but she didn't play favorites. She just wasn't a political animal, wasn't trying to go, to become the president of the company or something like that. And initially, she got very low reviews when I did the 360. I did a qualitative 360, very low ratings.
Wow.
We worked together for 6 months, and her ratings went from like out of 5, like maybe a 2 on average, to a 3.5 to 4 within 6 months. And that was, I don't take credit for that. That was she took it seriously, and she evolved as a leader. And there were a lot of frustrating moments for her taking over that team, but she ultimately did it, gained the respect of them, and they realized. I think one of the things that team realized is that it's okay for a leader to be different than our previous leader.
So and she worked with them in a way that they adopted to her style, as opposed to her changing the way she does things to accommodate the previous style.
Exactly. And just as a side note, her business unit went from the bottom to the top within just over a year, which in a big organization, that's very difficult to do.
Yeah.
So, and that, I don't attribute it to my coaching. I attribute her changes to, her learning curve, right? As a VP, because it's, it can be like this sometimes at your learning curve.
That's excellent. Okay. So, we've talked before, Eric, and you told me that you don't just coach within pharmaceuticals. You don't just coach within, actually, you don't just coach within healthcare. Correct me if I'm wrong. What are some of the spaces, I want to know, what are some of the spaces that you just never thought you'd be coaching in that you coach in now?
Yeah, high tech.
High tech.
I'm coaching a CEO of a small high tech company, and I am not a tech person at all.
Right.
But it doesn't matter, because I don't have to be an expert in that industry that they work in. What I have to be an expert in is how a leader is successful.
Got it.
And this CEO has done very well. Extremely well. And it's fun because he talks about things that I don't even understand.
Sure.
And but I don't worry about clarifying his technical parts of the discussions. What I focus on is what he's doing to lead his team.
I love it. So, a lot of people, coaching is a popular word now. It's a buzzword now, right? I mean, thanks to so many of the influencers out there and professionals like yourself, coaching it's so much more commonplace. However, I think there's a little bit of disconnect on what coaching actually means. I would love it, Eric, if you could just share with us, what does coaching actually mean? What are you actually helping a leader or a professional do?
Yeah. So for me, coaching is helping people think differently about a situation, asking great questions that actually get to the heart of whatever it is that they're dealing with. I do this little kind of workshop where we start out with something that's going on in the company. Maybe it's why is the sales department not respected by marketing? Let's just use that as something. And then what we do is we take 5 minutes, and all people can do is ask questions about that statement. They can't give input, they can't give feedback, they can't make a statement. They have to ask a question. So that may look something like maybe it's challenging that statement, or maybe it's, just it just starts opening up windows, different ways of thinking about it, until you get to the right question. And when you get to the right question, then you can answer it. So, for me, coaching gets to the heart of asking great questions that allow you to solve your own problems, because your answer becomes your own best solution. So, that's probably a very different view of some people on coaching, because they think of techniques, they think of all kinds of other things. And yeah, you use all that stuff in coaching, but at the heart of coaching, it's asking great questions. And it's not in the first question that people come up with, or first idea, it probably is not the best. You just keep asking, until you put that ladder against the wall where it's the right question, and you start climbing it and getting down into how you can solve the problem or the challenge.
Could you just give a small example of this exercise that helps get to the right question with, maybe an actual question that you asked in one of the groups you worked with, and then types of questions that they were only allowed to ask?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think back. There was one where it was the market access department of an organization.
Sure.
And if I remember right, the question was essentially, why is the market access department not respected by, X? I can't remember if it was marketing or sales. Why is there a disconnect between the two? And so again, the way this exercise works is that somebody will raise their hand and they'll ask a question about that statement.
Like what?
Okay, so it could be, is this a leadership issue? Do we do in market access something that offends or is not effective with, marketing? If that's
And no one can answer these questions. These are just questions.
And we just put them all up on, we make notes. Every question we take a note on. And it takes about 2 or 3 minutes before the light bulb starts coming on and people start getting it. Like all of a sudden they'll go, oh my gosh. Then they'll ask the question. And within 3 or 4 minutes, you get to the heart of what the right question is. But again, it's raising your hand, you ask a question, and then, somebody else raises their hand and asks another question that may or may not even be tied to the last person's comments. And, but what people want to do is they always want to make, critique whatever question's asked, and we don't let that happen. So it's a fun exercise.
Sounds like it. Sounds a good one. Okay. Should everybody have a coach?
Yes.
Every position have a coach.
Every position?
Yeah. So sales professionals, first line leaders, VPs, CEOs, and everyone in between, should they all have coaches?
Yes, but that doesn't mean that it has to be an outside coach. For me, a sales rep, their coach should be that first line manager, and at times the second line manager who works with them and who's watching them if they're being developed, to become a manager, or if they're being developed just to become, not just, but to move up in the sales ranks, within the field. So I do believe that everyone should have a coach. The biggest disconnect for coaching comes from VP and above. Most VPs don't effectively coach their subordinates, their team. So that's where the disconnect comes, where you need to get outside coaching.
Now, when sales professionals get outside coaching, have you seen that work very well for them, or have you even seen that? Let me ask you that.
I haven't seen that as much. I do know there are some that do it. And I also know, I've known sales reps who do not just the business part of coaching. Some of them get life coaches to help them navigate, through the challenges maybe that they're having in their life, or to help them get perspective on what it is that they really want to accomplish and where they want to go in their career. So, life coaches are great. I personally think that most business coaches if you're a credentialed executive coach, that you can help somebody with those life issues too throughout the coaching process. But yeah, Bill Gates said everyone needs a coach. So
I'm a big fan of that. Yeah, I agree with that. I think if, for example, in our program, we train and coach sales reps, and I think it's so useful because they're going through a lot of scenarios that they're not sure they can bring to their manager, or they're not sure they can bring to their colleagues, or they just have no idea how to navigate to begin with. And to be able to go to an outside source and really get a lot of value, and then go back to your company and do things differently, it provides a ton of value for them in their career.
Yeah, and there's training that reps get. What
Right.
you sound like, what you're doing is more coaching too, which is going to help them, as you said, navigate their career, network probably more effectively, move on in their career because they know how to work with other leaders, and that's critical. Yeah, I just don't see it as often. I think it would be great if somebody is a sales rep and they really want to progress in their career, get a coach, even if it's just for a couple of months, get a coach and have them help you find somebody who's got the experience, someone like you that has, a lot of experience dealing with, pharmaceuticals and healthcare in general, because you can help them.
Yeah. No, I mean, training, coaching, they're both critically important, and they can go a long way, especially at the sales professional level. And then, like you're saying, there's a gap with VPs that it's just not available to them. Now, I want to just stick there just for a second. Now, I'm under the impression that a lot of companies are starting to realize the necessity in coaching their VPs, and they are, looking for outside sources to do that. But you're saying that it's still not being met very well, or that's actually not the reality.
Yeah, I think there are some companies that have recognized how effective coaching is. Look, there's a Deloitte study that shows that the number one management tool that you can use to drive performance is coaching. So more organizations are starting to listen to those outside sources like that and to say, okay, what does coaching look like? The first thing they have to do is define coaching, because most people don't know what coaching is, right? But yeah, I think more organizations are, but there's still big gaps in organizations.
Yeah, and that's why you're here doing your thing, Eric.
That's right.
So, Eric, this was great. I'm so glad you got to spend time with us today. One thing I always ask when someone like yourself comes on the show, what overarching theme would you like to leave for all the listeners here? And our listeners are, some of them are CEOs, VPs, sales managers, and sales reps, and people that want to get into the industry. If there's one thing you can share with everyone, your overarching theme and how you do things, what would it be?
Yeah, I would say find a mentor and find a coach. And those usually a mentor isn't necessarily coaching you, they're doing other things, but you need a coach and you need a mentor. And if you get those things, it may lead to a sponsor that supports you and is going to help you get promoted in your career. But even if you don't want to go up in your career, having a mentor is still important. Even if you don't want to climb the career ladder, finding a mentor is vital to your success. And I actually lead for the Southwest region of HBA, the mentoring program, and it's amazing the impact. We do group mentoring, and I was a mentor too last year. We had a group of 5 mentees. 3 out of the 5 wanted to get promotions within their company, and during the 6-month time period that we did the mentoring program, 3 of them were promoted.
Wow.
Which is, that's amazing. Yeah. And it wasn't, again, the mentees in the group contributed to that just as much as the mentors. There were 2 mentors and 5 mentees. But find, whether it's a group mentorship or an individual mentor, find one, because it's going to help you in your career.
Excellent. Well, Eric, it was a pleasure to see you. Thanks for the time. And we're going to follow up with you and find out what you're doing in a little bit.
All right. Thanks, Samuel.
Definitely. And that was part 1 with Eric Turbiville. Make sure you tune in next week for part 2. Make sure you get his book as well. You know what? I challenge you, those listening out there, to get his book before next week's episode releases. It's such an insightful read, and he's really nailed leadership, and it's you get to really see why he's so effective in his role as an executive coach. Again, if you're someone that wants to get into the industry, healthcare sales, whether it be medical devices, pharmaceutical, genetic testing, then you need to reach out to us at evolveyoursuccess.com. And maybe you're out there and you've been trying to get an interview, or you've been interviewing and you're not landing anything, or you want to be in the field but you have no idea where to even start. Let us help you. Visit evolveyoursuccess.com, select attain a medical sales position, and just go ahead and register, and you will be able to attend one of our group client sessions and see exactly what we do and why we've had so much success in helping professionals get into the industry and get to where they want to be. And if you're leading a team and you want to make your sales team more effective anywhere in the healthcare sales space, or you want to teach them new methods to get access in different ways, maybe with social selling, and you're just thinking, what can I do? Make sure you check us out on LinkedIn. You can visit our company, Evolve Your Success, or you can find me directly under Samuel Adeyinka and just shoot me a message. One of our client specialists will reach out to you and have a nice discussion with you about where you can take your company, where you can take your organization, where you can take your team, and the different things you can do utilizing our programs. As always, I thank you for listening to the Medical Sales Podcast, and make sure you tune in next week for part 2 with Eric Turbiville. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a couple programs that show you exactly how to break into the medical sales industry, become a top-performing medical sales professional, and also how to masterfully navigate your career to executive-level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolveyoursuccess.com. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews.